You are listening to Personal Development Mastery Podcast, providing those with a desire to grow with the simple and consistent actions needed to master personal development and create the life they yearn for. I am your host, 𝗁𝗁𝗃𝗲𝗄, and my mission is to inspire you to grow, stand out, and take action towards a purposeful and fulfilling life. Today is a different episode. It's a solo episode where I will get to do a combination of three different things. The first one is to share some of my reflections and insights regarding the three most recent podcast interviews. The second one is to discuss two questions that I was asked by you, the podcast listeners. And the third and final one is a heads up about a rather significant but temporary change in the podcast's schedule. So I will start with my reflections and insights regarding three of the most recent podcast episodes, Brian Tracy, Amy Rowlinson and Victoria Rader. I actually did get this idea of reflecting on the previous podcasts by Amy Rowlinson, who was my guest in episode 242, because she does a similar thing on her own podcast. The conversation I had with her was intriguing as a fellow podcaster that she is, and in many ways what we do is so similar, and she also has over 200 episodes in her show. She's actually closing to 300, so there is real passion there. Thinking about it now, the big similarity between Amy's podcast and mine is this desire to empower others, to inspire them to take action, to forge their own paths or step out of the matrix, or however you want to call it, to participate in the awakening of human consciousness. Regardless of what you call it, it's for the collective growth. Another insight from that conversation was that each of us has a responsibility or duty even. So that's her and that's me and that's you and everyone, to use their talents, their superpowers, what they're good at, what they're passionate about, what they're exceptional at, and use them toward the betterment of others, toward helping, serving, empowering, inspiring others. The second out of the three episodes that I will discuss is number 230 with the legendary speaker Brian Tracy, author of 𝗬𝗲𝗃𝗄𝗆. I was privileged to have this conversation, and the big takeaway and also the topic of the conversation was self-discipline. And the definition he gave is that self-discipline is the ability to do what you should do, when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not. And in our podcast conversation, the message was clear throughout about this element of whether you'll feel like it or not. Self-discipline is really the most important success principle. Brian Tracy also discussed his most famous book, 𝗬𝗲𝗃𝗄𝗆, and it's simply amazing to just listen to him describe the concept of the book and the simple practical advice of basically doing your hardest task first. So that was episode 230. And the third and last interview that I will discuss today is episode 234 with Victoria Rader, where we discussed her new book, Prosper Me, 35 Universal Laws to Make Money Work for You. And it's challenging to try and condense what I got out of reading that book and having the conversation with Victoria in a few sentences here. in her book, she has combined in a beautiful way that really speaks on a deeper level than just your intellect. She has combined money with the spiritual element. And that's my own way of saying things, my own interpretation, not hers. In our podcast conversation, she spoke about the universal laws of money as a form of energy. So she has beautifully combined those two realms with a book which is full of inspiring moments. When you read it, the insights come to you because you recognize yourself in some situations she describes. Even more than that, in the book, each law has its own chapter, and at the end of each one there are some powerful actions to take, simple and practical actions to take, in order to incorporate that law into your life. It's an incredible book. I highly recommend it, and I will put a link in the show notes. If you've ever had a desire to have a bit more money, you are in for a treat, and you will find great value in the book. And now, so up next in the podcast today are two questions that you asked me, and thank you very much. Keep them coming. I enjoy it very, very much. The first question comes from Asad, who said he's thinking of exploring the Wim Hof method, and he asked about my experience with it and also the benefits that I have seen myself. So, I first found out about Wim Hof around 2018, and the first thing I started was having sometimes a cold shower and breathing exercise on occasion. And then the next year, 2019, I went to London to Wim Hof's event, and that's when I had my first ice bath, and it was also the first time I had this in that breathwork experience that we had. I went into a deep meditative state, and that was something beautiful. Afterwards, for a bit of time, I was doing it on and off. I kept doing the breathing exercise through the Wim Hof app practically every day, and also the cold showers. But the time when I actually went deeper into the method itself was about 7 months ago, when I bought the Wim Hof method, the online course. And I have been practicing it since, and I find it superb. Some elements, for example, that I have incorporated now that I didn't before, is yoga, which is amazing. I discovered yoga. It's brilliant. Also some strength exercises like push-ups or the horse stance that he does. And there is also the potential for much more cold exposure, but this is something I haven't gone deep into yet, apart from the cold showers, which I have every day. But I mean more, the ice baths or going outside in the winters without your t-shirt, this stuff. So in terms of your question about the benefits that I have experienced, the first thing that comes to mind is calmness. When you do the breathing exercise, you have, not always, but many times, I have this kind of blissful, energizing feeling that is amazing and grounding at the same time. And many times I do it before, for example, an interview, because it focuses me and grounds me, and I find it an invaluable tool in my arsenal of how to tackle the day with what's going on. So as for the cold exposure, the cold showers or the ice bath, apart from the incredible health benefits, which you can read about in Wim's website. Also, what comes to my mind is that it makes me feel alive. That's the word that comes to mind, alive. So give it a try for sure. I highly recommend it. And personally, I intend to carry on with it and go deeper as a practitioner of the Wim Hof method. And I expect next winter to be doing much more of the cold exposure element. And of course, I will keep you informed through the podcast. So thank you again for your question, Asad. The second question coming from one of you is, what would you say to someone who wants to grow, but most people around her peers, have a fixed mindset, preferring to settle than to grow? And this is a question from Alice, and it's a great question. You see, you become the average of the 5 people around you, the people you spend most time with. So if all these people have a fixed mindset and prefer to settle than to grow, then it's going to be difficult for you to break from that. What you could do is to surround yourself with more people, with peers, with a community, with people who value personal growth and want to do more with their lives. So one thing you can do is join a community of people, an online community, for example. It could be something as simple as a Facebook group that is about personal development, or it can be a community like the one I have for the patrons or the supporters of this podcast. And I will tell you more about it at the very end of this episode. So thank you for your question again, Alice. So before I conclude today, 2 more quick things. The next episode on Monday, number 238, is quite surprising and something very unique. I'm interviewing 2 people at the same time, so quite different from the one-to-one interviews I normally do. But even more interesting than that is the topic, which is about distilling the wisdom contained in the most important spiritual books written. So make sure that you tune in and listen if you consider yourself as a seeker in this age of global awakening. And there's one more thing, something that I'm going to discuss more in detail next Thursday, and give you the details then. As a heads up here, so that you are aware, after next week's episode 239, I will step back to doing 1 episode a week rather than 2. And I'm going to discuss this and the reasons behind it and all the plans for what is going to happen afterwards. Next Thursday's episode 239, so make sure you listen in. If you have enjoyed this episode, you will find great value in my podcast supporters community, and here are just some of the perks that await you there. You will gain access to exclusive content from me and my guests tailored for you. You will have your questions discussed in special Ask Me Anything episodes, and today you had a small sample of this kind of Ask Me Anything episode. You will also meet the other patrons of the podcast, people who value personal development just like you. So Alice, you are a fantastic candidate for that, and I will invite you personally to join us. And finally, when you become a podcast patron or supporter, you also have the opportunity to participate in my Mindset and Accountability Mastermind group that we hold every month. The link is in the show notes, or you can just type bit.ly/PDM supporter. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,